Thanks everyone for coming. I'm going to walk you through some of what LEAG is and the LEAG activities. Most of you are probably familiar with this, but some of you may not be. And we're going to end with a whole bunch of issues related to the upcoming Decadal Survey. Preparing LEAG and the lunar community to be well positioned in the next Decadal Survey is something that's near and dear to my heart and is one of my causes that I'm fighting for. So if you have comments or things that you want to talk about, this is it, the last part is going to be a discussion. Please come up to the microphones and talk about these things. If you're not comfortable doing that, please email me. That's totally fine too, or come talk to me. I'll be here all day today and tomorrow. So you have many ways to give me and all of LEAG your input, so feel free to use all of those avenues. We especially want to hear from early career people, students, postdocs, and everyone. So please don't hesitate. You know, your input is important too, and your perceptions and how you want to shape your community in the next 10 years is really what we're after. Okay, I guess I can do this myself. This is your LEAG Executive Committee. LEAG is the Lunar Exploration Analysis Group. We provide analysis as input to NASA planning. We are just here on your behalf. LEAG is actually the lunar community, and people who are interested in the lunar community is what the group is. We're just the executive committee who organizes meetings and things like that. So here are the people that you can talk to at any time about LEAG activities, but LEAG is you. So we're all part of LEAG, and we welcome all your inputs. Oh, I should go back. Who else is here from LEAG right now? I should have looked around. If you're on the LEAG Executive Committee, Greg is. Sarah is. Who's back here? Louise and Ben, right? So you can also talk to any of them as well. Okay, the moon obviously is something that's become more pronounced in importance to NASA planning. We have gone back through some of our planning documents from the past and tried to condense them into some easy to digest bullet points for lawmakers and Congress and people who are actually making space policy. This is our bullet points so far. Again, you're welcome to give your input, but this is what we're giving out. The Sam Lawrence, you'll be able to tell, made some of these slides, so they're all in nice sort of red, white, and blue colors. The moon is an opportunity for commerce. We want to use the resources of the moon to learn to live and work in space. We do science there. The science community is an equal partner, and we want to use the scientific opportunities enabled by the moon. And the opportunity for exploration. So exploration encompasses going and finding new things, but also extending our presence into outer space and learning how to live and work on other planets. So the moon is rich in all of these opportunities for us. Every journey has a first step. We're going to say that this is our first step in 2019. We have a fully funded SMD lunar program. That's excellent news for us. You'll hear Steve Clark this afternoon talk about the Lunar Discovery and Exploration Program, but those activities are all really excellent news for us as a lunar community, obviously. The commercial lunar payload services, again, come this afternoon if you're interested in hearing more about that. We have 3 of those under contract. The NASA provided instruments and the LSIP-P instruments. So there is a stable now of 28 instruments that will be flown to the moon in the next several years. So surface instruments on the moon, which is something that I've worked for my whole career. DALI, which is the next generation of lunar instruments, trying to get those developed and be able to be infused into the program. And DALI is open again this year, so I hope many of you propose to that, and hopefully will be open again next year. ANSGA, the pristine lunar samples, so we're opening a new core, lunar dual core, and opening that for the first time in 50 years. It's been under vacuum the whole time. The curators think it probably still is under vacuum. So we'll be opening that and doing some new analyses, bringing some really interesting new analyses into the community and with a lot of young PIs, which is awesome. New survey nodes were selected, of course. And congratulations to the new PIs in the room. We're glad to see you. And the human lunar lander effort is underway. I'm not going to talk so much about the human planning. Jake Bleacher is in the room, and you can certainly go bug him. And he'll be giving a talk on that as well. You can ask me. That doesn't mean that I'm going to have the answers. But what LEAG does in support of all of these efforts is we provide the advice and the counsel and the wisdom of the community that we get from you, and we distill it into planning documents, sometimes special action teams. We give that advice and counsel. Now, NASA doesn't have to do what we say, but we provide that analysis capability. And so in 2017 and 18, LEAG spun up all of these different teams and efforts and whatever, and you can see all the documents that we put together as advice or analysis to NASA to use in their planning efforts. So we have the Lunar Exploration Roadmap, Back to the Moon, Landing Site Workshop, Missions to the Lunar South Pole evaluation, Next Steps on the Moon, Advancing Science of the Moon. This was an update to the NRC's SCAM report. So all these documents are out there. They may look pretty similar in their content. Maybe they're just recast to fit to the bill, but you'll see a lot of familiar stuff in here, and they are available to anyone who needs them. They're all available on the LEAG website, which I failed to put on the slides, but probably you can look it up with Google. So what's coming up this year in 2018 and 19, we had an extremely successful LEAG meeting. We have a LEAG annual meeting every year. I'll show you the 19 planning for that in a minute. We had, I don't remember what it was, 250 people last year at the LEAG annual meeting, totally overran the bounds of the USRA facility in Columbia. And so we're moving from that facility for that reason. We preceded that with a Survive the Night workshop. What technologies do we have since the last time we went to the moon? What new technologies do we have that will enable robotic assets to survive the lunar night, and not just survive, but thrive and produce science during the lunar night? We changed the format to be more consistent with the way that other ag groups do their annual meetings, which is more of a status update to the community with some community feedback and findings and participatory in the actual analysis to NASA, rather than having it be more of a conference format where people are reporting on their science results. If you have any feedback on how you liked that versus the old format, you can give me that as well. I think it's important from my perspective to have more of that high-level analysis at these meetings, but please, tell me what you guys want to see. We also had these lightning talks with mission concepts. That was part of preparing for the next Decadal Survey. One of the things that we'll talk about for the next Decadal Survey is we are going to have to put forth, as a LEAG community, some mission concepts that we agree to as a community to prioritize within the next decade. That's very hard for us. We don't want to pit science against science. We certainly don't want to pit communities against each other, but it is a necessary thing for us to do to have some cohesion in recommending what we want to do as a community. So as a first step, we are trying to drive out all the great concepts that you have, get them out there in the open, get people talking about them, so that when it comes time to really boil them down to a few, you'll have all the information. We just had co-sponsored a Lunar ISRU conference or workshop last week in Columbia, and that was very well attended too, more than 200 attendees. And Deputy Administrator Morehard came and gave a speech at that. And there we were able to talk about what we should be doing as next steps in ISRU, what we need to enable commercial use of the moon as one of these ways of expanding our economic sphere to our nearest neighbor. We're also participating in the Astro 2020 white papers. Jack Burns, you heard earlier, he's taking the Astro input. So if you have things that you want to see the astronomy Decadal Survey do, well, first, I recommend that you go look at the statement of work or the statement of task for the astronomy Decadal Survey, because you might see some familiar aspects come out when we do ours. So they're doing theirs right now, and look at their process and see how that unfolds. And if you have special things that you want to see that you think are lunar relevant, talk to Jack about those. Okay, I'm just going to put this up quickly. Moon to Mars, sometimes called Artemis, sometimes called Next Steps on the Moon or Moon 2024. All of these things are great ways to refer to our national impetus to put humans on the moon. The National Space Council and what's LEAG relevant is the National Space Council has declared that the Lunar Exploration Roadmap that LEAG developed, that you developed, is the roadmap, is the guiding policy framework for this, for doing science and exploration. So thank you all for that. That's been very important, and thank you for your inputs and your work in creating that document. It's been very important for us to be able to put that forward as a guiding document for U.S. space policy. So thank you for that. That is a living document, so if there are updates to it, we will be asking for your help in creating those. The end goal is a permanent station on the moon by 2028. And one of the things that I know has been difficult for this community, and I'll just acknowledge it, is that things are moving really fast. It's not been easy to keep the community as involved as maybe some of you would really like. And we acknowledge that. One thing that I noticed from my time at NASA is when I came to NASA, which was during Constellation, NASA had to go outside of the agency for a lot of its lunar expertise. And this time, actually, we've been really good about having a lot of good lunar scientists within the agency. So people like Deborah Needham at Huntsville and Sam Lawrence at JSC and Noah Petro at Goddard and Jen and Rick and everyone at Ames. It's so nice to have that expertise within the agency. And so a lot of the things that are going on are what we call pre-decisional or notional, and you see those words fly around a lot. So rest assured that there are really good lunar people embedded in the process who are giving their best advice and trying to represent you as best as possible. However, obviously, we're going to want to get the whole community involved in this. So there will be special action teams, there will be more workshops, there'll be ways for everyone to be involved in this. So I know it's hard to say, well, sit tight and let the process play out, but that's where we are. So sit tight and let the process play out, and just be on standby for when we are going to be able to take everyone's inputs. As promised, this is about LEAG, the annual LEAG meeting, which is going to be October 28th through 30 in Washington, D.C. We're moving away from that Columbia facility because our expectation is because of the Decadal Survey and Artemis, we're going to cover both those topics at this meeting, and that's going to make it exceptionally important to have a big tent and to have many people there. So we are having it at a more central location at a hotel. It's actually going to be in the middle of DC. It's near DuPont Circle, so there's lots of restaurants and places for people to go, and there's a room block. So if you are already thinking about reserving this, please reserve it through LEAG on the LPI website. That'll get you in our room block, and that'll help us meet that goal. We have to sell so many of those rooms, right, to keep the cost down. So if you want to stay at this hotel, please use the room block if you can. So like I said, we're going to be spending a whole day just talking about the Planetary Decadal Survey. Some of the topics we'll bring up today. We're going to expand on that with some other topics. Day 2 and 3 is preparing for human exploration, and particularly Artemis and boots on the moon in 2024. I want to bring to your attention for the students, undergraduates and graduates and early career folks, there are 2 different travel awards that have been made for travel to the LEAG meeting by some giants of our field who are sadly no longer with us. So both B. Ray Hawk and Larry Taylor felt that it was extremely important for students and early career scientists to participate fully in these processes. Like I said, next decade is yours. So we definitely want to include you in these processes and hear your voices and make sure that you're part of these processes. So the deadline for those awards is August 1st. You do not have to be a U.S. citizen, but you have to be at a U.S. institution, and for one of them, you have to be traveling wholly within the U.S. So please, please, please get your applications in. They're not onerous, they're pretty short, and we really want you to come to and participate in that meeting with us. Okay, so I'm going to throw out some things for a little bit of discussion, and I hope that you will also take some of these into your focus groups and have some more focused discussions at lunch today and on Thursday. And like I said, there's a million ways to get your feedback back to us. So the Decadal Survey process is based in science. It comes from the Planetary Science Division, which is not LDEP. Okay, so LDEP, the Lunar Discovery Exploration Program, is within SMD, and that is where we do our crossover activities for humans and science, or working in partnership, which is a really important part of what we do. But the Decadal Survey is more of our traditional science route. So this is where we prioritize the science that we as a planetary science community want to do. And what that means is that we're in the bin as lunar science, we're in the same bin as Uranus, and as people who study Pluto, and as people who study Mars. And as someone who studied processes, that's okay with me, and also we don't have to choose between Moon and Mars anymore, right, because they're the same thing. So. But when we're talking about the decadal process, that's what we're really talking about, is planetary science. So the things that we're talking about here and the things that we're talking about today, please try to keep that in mind. These are big picture planetary science questions. The moon has no problem competing in this realm, right? Everything we talk about the moon, about being a window into the early solar system, and early solar system dynamics and how the solar system formed, and how planets differentiated and formed and evolved, and how surfaces are shaped today, all of those are big picture planetary science questions. The moon is fundamental to planetary science. So this is not a stretch for us to do, but we do have to keep it in mind when we're doing these exercises that we're in the planetary science realm and not just lunar science focused. The way this works is that the PSD director, who you'll see tomorrow, Lori Glaze, is going to prepare a statement of task. That's what NASA wants the report to come out to advise her. So she's going to want some specific advice on how to implement her program for the next decade. So she is going to ask the national academies to provide her with that document. There is some that she can say, there's some things that she can ask for, but she can't be overly specific. She's asking the national academies to do an analysis and provide advice. The national academies will take that statement of task, and they're the ones who pick the chair. They're the ones who pick the panels. They're the ones who actually pick the panel structure. So it's up to them how to implement that task. So we can advise Lori or ask Lori or try to influence Lori, but ultimately the national academies are doing the study and implementing the study. They expect to announce the chair for the Decadal Survey, Planetary Decadal Survey at LPSC next year, so that's sort of the timescale that we're looking at. But before that, when we're talking about this statement of task, that's where we are trying to give our input now. That statement of task is going to come out in the fall. One of the things that Lori has asked us specifically to consider as input to this process is the last decadal survey, when you go read it, in fact, the last two decadal surveys, if you go read them, were destination focused or body focused. What do we do at Mars? What do we do for the outer planets? What do we do for the inner planets like Mercury, Venus, the moon? So they were destination focused, and that aligns well with our ag group structure. Lori has asked us to consider as a community, what if we move toward a more process or big question based decadal survey? How would that look? What would those big questions be? How would our interests map to those big questions? And not just our interests LEAG, but our interests across the solar system. So that's one thing that we'll be doing today. So more on that in a minute. One of the things that we want to do in parallel with giving this direct input is this science goals document. This is something that you've heard me talk about before, and I haven't executed it yet. So you're going to continue to hear me, so I'll get to say that we're planning for it. Amy Fagan is going to be helping with this She may end up leading it if I just keep letting it go. So Amy Fagan's probably your better one to talk to. But this is a subset of the LUR. Like I said, the Lunar Exploration Roadmap is the big guiding document. We're not trying to replace that. We're not trying to second guess it. It's got science embedded in it. But like I said, for the Decadal Survey, it is very science focused. And so we want to pull out those science goals and we want to say, okay, well, what are the things that we can really make progress on in the next decade within the lunar community to meet those science goals? A couple other things that I want to mention preparing for the next Decadal Survey. There was this planetary mission concept studies that several of you probably proposed to. So there's a couple things that I want to query the audience on. One is that we had a collaborative document to try to have teams pull in people onto their science teams who maybe weren't in their immediate sphere of knowledge. So maybe young career scientists or people from different institutions, other scientists working on related fields. I would love your feedback on how that worked. If you used that document while making your proposal, or if you were a PI or a co-I, if you didn't, why didn't you? If you put your name on that document and never got a call, how did that make you feel? All of these things. So anything related to that process, we would love to hear your feedback. In fact, it's really necessary to hear your feedback because we are considering trying to use this kind of process for Decadal white papers. How do we make our white papers more inclusive and more reflective of the community and make sure people are involved? So that was sort of a trial run. Did it work? Did it not work? What would you like to see done differently? But in conjunction with that, something that I think would be really great would be to get credit for those mission studies, right? We put in proposals and we don't get a lot of external currency for putting in a proposal. We can publish those proposals, not as is, but by combining them with some good landing site analysis. And the purpose of this is twofold. The LRO team has in its extended mission proposal an idea to create landing site products for sites that are of scientific importance but aren't necessarily obviously safe sites on the moon. So a lot of times when we have new participants who want to build landers, they look at the moon, they say, well, the basalts, the Mare basalts are safe, let's just go there. And there's a lot of other places on the moon that are scientifically really exciting and scientifically interesting. We have the data from LRO to show whether there are safe landing sites. I say whether, there are safe landing sites everywhere. They may not be perfectly obvious to you on first glance. So we have an activity within the LRO science team to pick some of those landing sites and do some proof of concept and say, where would you go if you wanted to go to a swirl, or you wanted to go to Aristarchus, or you wanted to go to Ina? Where's a good safe landing site? And provide that to the community to say, if you were planning to do this, there are perfectly good sites for you. Well, we're going to try to marry that concept with the PCMSs. So if you were a PI or a co-I on one of those planetary mission concept studies, and you would like to participate, we would love to have you. We think that we can make this a publishable, maybe special issue or a journal or something, where you can lay out your idea of your mission concept. You can lay out the science case for it, why it's important, what kind of mission class it is. It doesn't have to be a full-up engineering study. This is just your ideas. Marry it with a candidate landing site. Say, if we were to do this, here's a good landing site. Here's how it's safe. Here's how it's interesting. It's a nice little self-contained product. We all get credit for doing the science and the analysis. We give credibility to the missions and the landing sites. So please, if you're on a team, even if you don't end up getting funded or you PI'd a mission concept study team, talk to Maria Banks, who's right here, or to me about it. I think this could be a really powerful way to get some mission concepts and some landing sites out there, not just for the Decadal Survey, but also for the ECLIPSE program and future landing sites. White papers for the Decadal Survey are a really important input to the Decadal. So this is how the people on the panel get a lot of ideas from you. We had a big push last time to have white papers from LEAG and from the lunar community. how did that work, like I said, with that collaborative document? But also think about this. Should your LEAG executive committee or should LEAG as a group initiate specific white papers on specific topics? Or should it all be grassroots? If it's grassroots, how do we as a community make sure or ensure that all of our most important topics are covered and are heard by the Decadal panel? Would it be more powerful to have everyone who's interested in one topic be on one big white paper? Would it be more effective to have very many smaller white papers from different authors? There are lots of ways to do this. There's no one right answer. There's probably not even one good answer. There's probably just lots of answers. So anything that you have related to this, we would like to hear. Those, again, will be due next year sometime probably, so we've got some time to think about this. Here's another topic that we need to talk about, which is new frontiers. So in the Decadal Survey, the Decadal Survey panelists hear from everyone. Here are some candidate missions. Prioritize our flagship missions, which are the ones that are over $1 billion to execute over the lifetime of the mission. They also provide a list and provide an unprioritized but closed list of New Frontiers candidate missions. And so there were 5, and then there were 7 candidate missions that were put together in the Decadal Survey that were prioritized based on input from that were included based on input from the community. So New Frontiers is not open to any idea right now. It's restricted to that list. And discoveries are not restricted at all. Of course, discoveries are up to the community to propose whatever science you want. So that's the way that's broken out right now. We are specifically wondering whether you feel that the New Frontiers should be opened up to any possible candidate. I will remind you that there were 7 candidate New Frontiers missions that one could do. 2 of them were lunar. If we open it up to everyone, you can do that math. So we want to hear the pros and cons of opening New Frontiers up in the next Decadal Survey to any takers. There are pros and there are cons, just there are, and so it sort of depends on how you're going to weight these things. If you think that there shouldn't be a candidate list at all, that it should just be free and open, that can respond to changing priorities in science, new discoveries that come up, and you can respond to them and say, this requires a big mission to go study it, and I can propose that now. No solar system objects should be excluded. There are certainly objects that are excluded from the current list, such as Mars. So this would mean that everyone can propose their good ideas. If you do make a candidate list, though, that means that that list has been vetted by the Decadal Survey panel and by the community. It reflects our priorities, especially for missions that cost a lot. They cost a lot to NASA, and they also cost a lot to the proposing institutions. That part is what a lot of people say. I think what we really mean by that is that it makes those proposing institutions the de facto gatekeepers. That means that your idea is not just based on science merit, it's about who you know and how you can get in to that system, and it makes those institutions the arbiters of what's good science and what's proposable. So significant pluses, significant minuses. Again, no good answer. We just want to hear what you would have to say. And if you were to open up the New Frontiers, if you were to keep a list within the Decadal Survey, how do we keep it current? Do we do a midterm review? We've tried that once. We did another one where NASA went to CAPS and asked them to add. So how would you keep it current in response to changing priorities? Okay, and last, I guess I didn't expect this to take so long, but okay, last is these question-based structure for the next Decadal Survey. I sent this out on the Lunar listserv. If you didn't get it, ask me. All I did was put up some candidate straw questions. These are not meant to be the questions that we are putting forward. Let me emphasize that. These came out of my head onto paper specifically so that you have something to start with, so that you're not presented with a blank slide and say, come up with questions. So these are not the questions that we're putting forward. I just want to put them out there as possible ways to think about question-based Decadal Survey. And to re-emphasize, we all everyone in the lunar community has to find a home in the questions that are in the Decadal Survey. We have to. That's our imperative as LEAG, is to make sure these questions are phrased in such a way that every one of us has a home in there. No research is left out, that our science priorities are included, and that our most important missions that we want to see are emphasized within those questions. However, it's also our imperative as a community to make sure that not just the lunar community feels like it has a home, but everyone in planetary science has a home. So when you are thinking about how to formulate these questions, my test to myself is, would a Mars person go for that question? Would a rings person go for that question? If you put a question out there and you would think, well, someone who works on Uranus wouldn't feel like they have a home in that set of questions, then that's not the best set of questions. Everyone in planetary has to be represented. So that's why these are sort of written the way they are, and they've got some parentheticals that show my thought process. I was a little hesitant to put this up there because it's just really my thought process. But that's what I mean with these parentheticals, is here's the kind of things that it would include. Can we make sure that everyone in the solar system, everyone in the LEAG community, everyone in the lunar community, everyone in the solar system has a place in these questions? So that's what this is for. I would really like each focus group, as you meet today, there's some process-focused focus groups. So come up with your own questions. Maybe have this little debate. How would you frame your science so that everyone in your room has a home, everyone in lunar community has a home, and people in process-focused focus groups? So come up with your own questions. Maybe have this little debate. How would you frame your science so that everyone in your room has a home, everyone in lunar community has a home, and people in the solar system have a home in your questions? And so I will stop gabbing there and open it up for your discussion and questions. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So thank you very much, Barb. This is just fantastic. Really appreciate your and Sam's leadership on all of this. And one comment, I really like that last question because it has a bridge to human exploration. And I just want to say that I think that that's being done at headquarters. I know Sarah and Jake and others meet regularly. And I think that rather than having a planetary decadal that's walled off from human exploration, as has happened in the past, it's important to create those bridges. So that looks like a very nice start.
So my comment to that is that does not mean that we'll make it into the decadal. Okay, so like I said, the decadal is science focused. My second comment is be careful what you wish for, right? If you hitch your wagon to that star, your fortunes may rise and fall with that program. So it is, my personal feeling is a little bit different from yours, but certainly the community should figure this out. Lori is well aware of this. It's not just an issue for the lunar community. Mars has this, and the near-Earth objects, the asteroid community has this as well. So how we handle science connections to other areas of NASA is something that has not been resolved, but is certainly being thought about. Dana.
So I think this is a lot of really important discussion, and I mean the LEAG meeting is going to be, really packed trying to get all this stuff in. But for this particular thing with the how we frame the decadal survey versus body specific versus question specific, I mean, the science is really the driver of why we want to go there and what we want to learn. However, when we're doing a flagship mission, it is going to go to a body. And it's going to cover a very large array of different science questions. So, I mean, from that perspective, having a body-focused list where you say what kinds of science you can do at that body may be the better solution.
I completely agree with you. I think that you've hit on sort of the take this to its logical but extreme conclusion, and you're totally right. What's going to come out of this is still going to be missions that by necessity are body-focused missions that have to then answer to those science questions. I think this could be an incremental improvement in the sense that I think it would bring those communities together, and we would get away from it's Venus's turn, we have too many small bodies missions, why are you going to the moon for a science mission when humans are going to go there? Those kinds of things do come up in our community and do pervade our community. And so I think that this approach could help us get away from that. But you're totally right. You're going to come down to those same things in the end. So this may not be the answer that we want. That's perfectly good response to this.
Okay, and I just want to make a quick plug that the pre-decadal concept study proposal that my group put in, we have a poster, number 68, so come by and see it.
Write that into 6 pages.
Yeah, so just to follow up on, I think, the sentiment Dana was expressing. So I can see the allure from NASA leadership for wanting to look at big questions and overarching science goals. But then I think the devil's in the details because, you know, with each planetary body, the cutting edge science questions are not necessarily the same. And so that's something
That's
we
right.
should just consider. And part of the reason for that is because the data sets and the state of knowledge for those different bodies are different. And so when you get down, when the rubber hits the road to trying to pull it into a big picture, you know, the top science is different depending on the destination. Even though the process is the same, there are impacts throughout the solar system. There's volcanism, there's ices, but there's some nuance there that at least we should be considering.
Because I know the data really well. It may be, well, to make the most improvement in this field, we do need to go someplace else. And so I think it's to give that cross-pollination. You can tell how I come down on this question. You can, but I'm totally hearing what you're saying, and, that's why we want to collect that. So Maria has agreed to take your comments and questions and write them down. So I'm not ignoring them by not writing them down. I'm capturing all of that.
I'm going to actually take the opposite approach here. And that I like this a lot because I think missions should be fundamentally changing the science. Science is driven by problems, right? So this is identifying the major problems we have to solve as a community. Then you identify what's the best way to go after that problem, whatever world it is, however you want to solve that. And if you can solve multiple questions at the same time, that's what you want to do. And I think that does get us out of this point of whose turn it is, or why this incremental science is so much more important than this fundamental science over here. I mean, the goal is to avoid incremental science and do fundamental science. This is a way to do it.
Yeah, so think about how your science would fit into this kind of structure, and I think where you think your science falls is sort of how you're going to end up arguing for or against it. Brian?
Yes, Barbara. I'd like to think that there is another element in all of this, and that is the culture with which you approach, for example, the moon. And it's no guess that I would like to think that the culture for addressing the dust on the moon is a different culture from addressing the bulk inert, relatively inert moon. And I think the lunar science to date has largely been geocentric, Earth-centred, as per the 8th continent, for example. I mentioned this briefly to Carly earlier. The dust on the moon, the top 2 to 5 centimetres of the moon, at least on the day side, is a rich laboratory of chemistry that is not replicated or could be replicated on Earth, nanoparticles of dust, which is a complete new set of laws of physics, if you like, and dynamic activity. Very, very fine particles. It's lapped by the solar wind. So the chemistry of it is basically the chemicals that a day or two earlier were actually elements of the moon, of the sun.
So Brian, how would you don't have to tell me now in real time, but what I want you to do is to find a way in one of these questions or a question of your own to embed that, to make sure that gets addressed, because the moon isn't the only place that happens. Airless bodies also have these kinds of processes.
But the moon is the only one that I've made any measurements on.
I agree with,
But-
I
but
agree, but right, we're
what-
gonna
what you've
take
got
that and
to
broaden
do-
it out.
What we've got to do is expand the realm of interest into scientists who are experts in nanophysics.
Sure, and that's
And
what
in-
is,
in
and
chemistry
right, and
and the
that's what
like.
our research, yeah, exactly. No, you're right.
So-
And that's what we hope to do with these kinds of broad questions, is sort of say, you can play in this arena too. You don't have to be a lunar scientist. Yep, absolutely true. Carly?
I don't know where I stand in the issues or the question you raised about how to package what we're all concerned with in the next decadal. But I do resonate strongly with your call how important this activity is to everything that we care about. Everyone in this room is here because we have a vested interest and commitment to various science and applications at the moon. It's as some of your earlier slides showed, enormous opportunities in multiple different directions. So I think everyone resonates strongly with that. However, the Decadal Survey, the Decadal studies are so essential to keep what we all care about on the map. If you look at the history of lunar exploration after Apollo, there was what, 25, 30 years of nothing? And then we got a few little missions that opened the world, and we've had a renaissance with the international community in the last decade. This is wonderful, but we're not being heard as a community. And input into this is so important that we're on the map for all the reasons that we care about and which you outlined in your discussion here. I can't stress, and I completely agree with you, how important this activity is, that everybody put your thinking caps on, write your white papers, have input. We have to be heard. This is so important. And thank you, Barbara, for bringing this forward.
Thank you for emphasizing that, Carly. Really, please. There's so many avenues. If you have thoughts on any of these, please, please, please give them to us.
Tim Glotch, Stony Brook. I want to 100% agree with everything Carly just said. To that point, the collaborative tool that you built for the PMCS proposals, I PI'd one of those. I found it extremely useful, and I think it's a great model for encouraging collaboration for white papers. I ended up for my proposal with a large team of co-Is and collaborators, and probably half of them came via that spreadsheet.
Oh,
and
that's
people who
so
indicated interest.
perfect.
So
Thank
I
you.
can see how this would be a really good tool for writing the white papers too. So
Great.
thank you for doing that, and I encourage you and the rest of the LEAG Executive Committee to consider doing it again, and for the community, make use of it too, because it's a fantastic resource for us.
Yeah, thanks for that. I really appreciate that. And remember, on your white papers, you don't have to pay any of those people. Just put their names on it. Anyone else? Yeah, go ahead.
And I just come back to that one point. After Apollo era in, let's say, 72, there was not a renaissance in 30 years. There was 2 dust experiments were unmentioned until 2009. And one of those was mine, but I'll put that aside for the moment. The other one, which was most important, was the discovery of cohesive forces of dust. That's Tommy Gold's report in Apollo 14 preliminary science report. Cohesive forces of dust, strong enough to keep numbers together. That was completely forgotten during the era of the renaissance of levitated dust from the Apollo 17 LEAG experiment.
So we definitely want to, like I said, we want to have all of these represented and make sure they all have a home, so that when we do go back to some of these old experiments, that we've got the backup in the Decadal Survey to say these are important. Absolutely. All right, I think that's it for me. Thank you, everyone. Again, please give us your input.